everyone, it's Jananie and welcome back to another episode of #EpicBookRecs. So this is the monthly series that I do here on the Epic Reads channel where I recommend a bunch of books based on a certain theme. And we've done a bunch of fun and exciting themes before that are all linked down below in the playlist. But for today's video, since we are nearing the end of 2021, I thought it might be fun to round up all of my favorite books of 2021. So these are my top 10 favorite YA books of 2021, and actually most of these books, I think 9 out of 10 actually came out in 2021 as well. So it feels like very timely for this year and for the end of the year as we're all thinking about our favorite books of the year. So without further ado, let's just jump into the books. And these are in no particular order, but I did love all of them. All right, we're starting off spooky with White Smoke by Tiffany D. Jackson. This is one that I picked up for spooky season in October, and it was the perfect Halloween read. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Tiffany D. Jackson writes a lot of YA thrillers, some impeccable ones with some incredibly complex characters and some really great twists as well. And so this was her first ever YA horror, and it did not disappoint. This is the perfect haunted house story you could imagine. One that completely creeps you out at all the right moments, but also has a really compelling main character that we love following. I was both enraptured by the story and wanted to know what was going to happen next, but also scared out of my mind, and I think that combination was just fantastic. And I also just really cared for all the characters in the book and how their story was going to end. And I think Tiffany D. Jackson did a really great job of bringing in some real life elements to add to the horror aspects of the book, which I think made it just really stand out. So if you're looking for a little bit of a scare, a little bit of a thrill, this is definitely the one to pick up. All right, next on this list is another favorite author of mine, and that is Tara Mafi's new book, An Emotion of Great Delight. So this is Tara Mafi's second contemporary. Many of you may know her from the Shatter Me series, which is her YA dystopian series. I haven't personally read that one, but I absolutely love her contemporaries. And A Very Large Expanse of Sea, which she released a few years ago, was just one of my favorite contemporaries because I thought it just hit so many great points and themes, and this one was no different. This is a very, very short book that packs a punch and is really about the emotions of the character and the grief that she's going through in a very tumultuous point in her life. She's recently lost her brother, she's going through a friend breakup, and she also finds herself in the middle of a will they won't they romance, which is just so heartbreaking at points in this book as well. And I think overall the vibe of this book is very sad, but I think it is very relatable for anyone who has gone through a tough time and anyone who has experienced any kind of grief, whether it is the physical loss of having someone pass in your life or the emotional loss of, losing a relationship in your life. This one also has some really amazing quotes and lines that will just leave you in awe, so it's definitely one to just take your breath away. All right, the next one is one that pleasantly surprised me in the best way possible. I remember grinning the entire time reading it, and that book is Charming as a Verb by Philippe. And this is just the quintessential perfect YA contemporary that you can read, whether you are a teen in high school or someone older trying to look back on teen days. I think it's such a fun book. It's so relatable for all the experiences that I had as a teen as well. And basically it follows our main character, Halti, who is a bit of a go-getter, and he wants to get into Columbia University because his dad really wants him to, but he has his other aspirations as well, but he's just really focused on getting into this university. But when a less than honest scheme of his, dog walking scheme of his, gets revealed by a classmate of his who is not so socially adept, the two of them sort of strike a deal to help each other out, and it blossoms into something more. This has a bit of a romance, but it's more of a coming of age story for Halti himself and him discovering what he wants to do with his life and where he wants to go with his future, and also learning some important lessons and coming up against some hard truths, which I think just made for a really great read. If you're looking for a book to put a smile on your face, or if you're looking for a really charming main character, this is definitely the book to pick up. All right, the next book is a sci-fi that actually came out last year, I think, and the sequel came out this year, and that book is Goddess in the Machine by Lora Beth Johnson. I absolutely loved this book when I picked it up because it's the perfect sci-fi that has all the sci-fi tropes and elements to it, but also some really great plot twists as well and some endearing characters. Basically, the premise of this book is that the main character, Andra, is a 22nd century teen, and she goes into cryonic sleep along with her friends and family with the intention that they're all going to wake up 100 years later on a different planet and sort of colonize that new planet. But what happens instead is that Anja wakes up one day and it is the year 3102, and none of her friends and family are around her, and everyone around her is calling her some sort of goddess. And so what she realizes is that she is on an unrecognizable planet and that the people around her have no real sense of technology. They think it's some sort of magic that's going on and that she is some sort of goddess emerging from the machine, which is just such a cool concept. And I think it made for some really interesting questions about humanity, about, technology and the way we view it. And it was just an overall really interesting and thought-provoking read. And it was also an interesting imagination of our future. So if you're looking for a fun sci-fi, something with a lot of great plot twists and something that has just a really interesting premise and, very unique premise, then this is definitely the one to pick up. Alrighty, this next one is actually a sequel that I absolutely loved and I could not go without mentioning because, yeah, it was just one of my favorite books of 2021. And honestly, I'm not surprised that this ended up on this list because I absolutely love this author. And that book is Chain of Iron by Cassandra Clare. So many of you may know Cassandra Clare as the author of all these Shadowhunter books. And this is actually the 4th series in the Shadowhunters universe, and it is The Last Hours. And the first book is called Chain of Gold, and this is the second book, Chain of Iron. And I don't want to spoil too much about any of the various timelines that go on in the Shadowhunters, but this particular series is set in the early 1900s. So it's got that Elizabethan era vibe to it, and it features some characters who are a bit familiar to those of you who have read the Infernal Devices as well. But for those of you who are unfamiliar with Shadowhunters as a whole, in Cassandra Clare's books, basically they are set in our real world, but on the fringes of our real world, there's the shadow world. So there are demons constantly crossing into the human world, and there are these people called Shadowhunters who are tasked with sort of keeping the peace between the shadow realm and the regular mortal realm. And so they are their own society and culture of people and have their own things going on. And so this series sort of deals with some Shadowhunters in London and their goings on. I absolutely love the characters in this particular series, and some of the twists and turns in this particular book just sent me, and I absolutely loved it. It was just such a treat, and I loved reading about these characters, so it was just so much fun. So if you're a fan of Shadowhunters, if you haven't started the Last Hour series yet, I would highly recommend it. It is probably my new favorite Shadowhunters series. Alrighty, the next book is a bit of a thriller that I really enjoyed, and that is Ace of Spades by Faridah Àbíké-Íyímídé. And this one is, as I said, a YA thriller, and it follows 2 black students at this very elite private academy called Nevaeh. And one of them is Chiamaka, who is very privileged. She comes from a quite wealthy background, and she is known as the queen bee at the school. And then our other main character, Devin, is a scholarship student at the school, and he's always felt a bit like a fish out of water. And these 2 characters have never actually interacted all that much. All they really know about each other is that they are the only other black students at the school. But when the 2 of them are named prefects in their final year at Nevaeh, something strange starts to happen. A person by the name of Aces starts sending these anonymous texts to everyone in the school, revealing different secrets about Chiamaka and Devin. And some of them happen to be real things, but some of them are sort of fabricated as well. And the 2 of them start to realize that they are getting targeted for a very specific reason and have to work together to find out who Aces is and stop them. This book was such a great thriller. The thriller elements were all just paced really nicely. And I was just so terrified for what was going to happen to these characters because of the way it was building towards the end. And some of the revelations that we have by the end were just so interesting and so well done. So I think the overall thriller aspect was really, really cool. And then the book also features a bit of a romance as well on both characters' sides. So if you're looking for a really chilling, thrilling book that has a really incredible discussion of race and privilege, this is definitely the one to pick up. Alrighty, the next book is probably my most favorite book on this list, and that is Yolk by Mary H.K. Choi. So this one is a story about sisters, and that's particularly why I love it, because I do have 2 sisters myself. Basically, this book follows our 2 main characters, Jane and June, but mostly Jane, who is the perspective character. They are sisters. June is the older sister, Jane is the younger one, and they have always had a bit of a complicated relationship. They were really close when they were younger, but when June went off to college and then started to work, and then when Jane went off to college, they sort of grew apart and, you know, their relationship got a bit fraught. But things are forced to change when June is diagnosed with cancer and Jane is sort of forced to confront her sister and, you know, be around her sister in a way that she hasn't had to before and be there for her. And it was just such a heartwarming read at some point, seeing their relationship sort of mend and shift as they try to be there for each other. But I also feel like I love this book just being in Jane's head because she's a very blunt and to the point character who's often self-deprecating and who has a really funny sense of humor. And I just loved being in her head because she was just so relatable as well. And there were so many parts where she would say a line in this book that I was like, yes, I love this. This is so relatable. And she is a bit on the older side. She's in college when the book starts. So this is definitely a bit of an older YA if you're looking for one. But overall, if you're just looking for a sense of humor that is just really relatable and self-deprecating, if you are looking for a story about sisters, about sibling relationships, this is definitely the book to pick up. Alrighty, the next book is probably the cutest book on this list and one that I absolutely loved just everything about it. That book is Hani and Ishu's Guide to Fake Dating by Adiba Jaigirdar. This book was just the most adorable queer romance, YA romance that I could have picked up. This basically involves a fake dating romance between two Bengali American girls. So one is Hani and then the other is Ishu. So Hani is out to her parents, she is bi, and when she sort of comes out to her friends, they are horrible and do not believe her and, you know, are like, oh, well, prove it, or, you know, how do you know? And all these just really ignorant things. And so Hani is determined to prove to them that she is in fact bi and she also likes girls, and so she gets into a fake dating romance with the other Bengali girl at her school named Ishu, and Ishu has her own reasons for getting into this fake dating romance. She wants to get some popularity credit to help with her college applications and all of that, so the two of them end up in this agreement to fake date, and obviously they fall in love, and it was just the most adorable thing ever. They are the cutest characters, and they also had their own personal things going on with their families respectively, which I found really compelling. And it was also just really interesting to see the differences in their parents. Although they are both Bengali, they practice different religions and have different views on things, and their parents have different levels of strictness as well. So it was just really interesting and nice to see that level of representation. So if you're looking for a fake dating romance, if you're looking for just an adorable, cute romance, if you're looking for a queer romance, this is definitely the one to pick up. Alrighty, the final book on this list is actually the third book in a series that I absolutely love, which came out this year. So that series is the Gilded Wolves series by Roshani Chokshi, and the book that is in this top 10 list of books that I loved from 2021 is The Bronze Beast by Roshani Chokshi. So as I said, this one is the third book in the Gilded Wolves series, and this one in particular takes place in Venice, which was just a really cool and interesting setting, and all three books take place in a different location but with the same characters and like a continuous story. So the first one is in Paris, the second one is in Russia, and then this third one is in Venice. But for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Gilded Wolves series, it is a bit of a historical fantasy. It is set in the 1800s and it deals with themes of colonialism as well. And the series actually follows about 5 to 6 different characters. They're all pretty diverse and come from different backgrounds and locations in the world, but they all sort of work together and live in this one hotel owned by Severin, which is one of our main characters. And sort of the bigger picture element to this series is that in this version of our world and, you know, this historical version of our world, there is this type of magic called forging, which is sort of this ancient power that lets people imbue objects with power, with magical power, and allows them to do things. And so it really ties into these themes of colonialism as well. And these 5 to 6 different characters all pull off these different heists to steal these objects from these different families and sort of houses in the Order of Babel, which is this like society of forgers, I would say. And each of the characters has their own goals and motivations and reasons for doing what they're doing. And so the overall series is just really interesting to read about because we are getting each perspective and each of them feels so vivid and layered, which is just so great to read. And this book in particular, the third and final book, really wrapped up the series in an incredible way. And I just loved the way it ended, and I loved the twists and turns that Roshani Chokshi put in along the way. And overall, it was just a wonderful conclusion, but also one that just like broke my heart. So if you're looking for a bit of a historical book to pick up or a bit of a fantasy to pick up, if you're looking for a cast of characters that you're just gonna fall completely in love with, this is definitely the series to pick up. Alrighty, but those are the top 10 books on my list for 2021 of the YA books that I loved this year. All these books hit me in a different way, and I'm so grateful that I got to read them in 2021. And I really hope that some of you will actually go pick them them up as well. I think they're all amazing and you'll definitely enjoy them. But I'd love to hear from all of you. What were your top 10 favorite YA books of 2021? Are any of the ones on my list on your list? Please let me know. I would love to discuss in the comments. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I'm Jananie from the channel This Story Ain't Over, and I will see you in the next episode of #EpicBookRecs. Bye!